Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. After 3 months with the army, I found out I was pregnant. It was also at this time that my heroic battalion commander, my husband's first love, came back from abroad. She was dressed in an elegant gown, standing out among the gray-blue uniforms like a proud peacock. Everyone whispered that if it weren't for me, she would have been the most honored officer's wife in the compound. My husband, Daniel Miller, looked at her with a burning gaze I had never seen before. I touched my belly where little neon one was quietly growing and decided I wouldn't fight anymore. Whoever wanted to be the officer's wife could have that title. I would go back to the city with my unborn child, get an apartment, and build a career of my own. That had to be better than staying here, constantly weighed against others' eyes. But just as I stepped onto the train heading home, that usually calm, self-controlled man went mad, his eyes red as he clawed desperately at the train window. "Sis-in-law, something big just happened. Linda from the performing troupe has come back." My neighbor, Jacob Brown, rushed into my house while I was still engrossed in a barefoot doctor's manual, reading with great interest. The sunshine outside the window was warm, almost overflowing, making me feel drowsy. "Linda." I slowly lifted my eyelids. The name was like a pebble forgotten in some corner, stirring not the slightest ripple in my heart. "Oh, my dear sister-in-law, how can you not be anxious? She's that one." Jacob lowered his voice, eyes darting, afraid that the walls might have ears. Of course, I knew exactly who that one was. Linda, the young medic Daniel had carried off the battlefield. She was the indelible mark on his heart, the name he must have whispered in his dreams. And I, Sarah Johnson, had been introduced to him by the organization with our families arranging the match. We had only met 3 times before we became husband and wife on paper. I closed the book slowly and stroked my still flat stomach. There was already a small life here, Daniel's and mine. What's there to be anxious about? I chuckled softly, stood up, and walked to the window, gazing at the tall sycamore tree in the courtyard. What's meant to come will come. No sooner had I spoken than a stir rose at the compound gate. Following everyone's eyes, I saw Daniel's tall, commanding figure standing next to a woman in an off-white dress. The fabric was exquisite, gleaming softly in the sun, setting off her fair skin and refined grace. That woman was Linda, and indeed her reputation was well earned. She tilted her head slightly as she gazed at Daniel, her expression full of excitement and longing after their long separation. And my husband, who was known for his stern and solemn demeanor, was now looking at her with a gentleness and guilt I had never seen before. The officers' wives nearby whispered among themselves, their sympathetic yet gloating eyes pricking into me like fine needles. "That's Linda, even prettier than her photos. They say if her family hadn't fallen on hard times back then, Sarah wouldn't even be here. Commander Daniel must still be thinking about her. Just look at his eyes." I listened to their talk, my heart calm as still water. After a year of marriage, Daniel had treated me with respect and courtesy, giving me everything an officer's wife should have. He handed over all his salary, remembered to buy me my favorite pastries on anniversaries, and when I was sick, clumsily tried to make a bowl of bland ginger soup. He was a good soldier and a competent husband, but not a man who loved me. His love had long ago been given to Linda along with that fragile eggshell ring he had crafted with his own hands during the war. Now that the true one had returned, the substitute had no reason to stay. I turned back into the house, pulled out a locked wooden box from the bottom of my trunk, and opened it. Inside lay a black and white photograph. In it, a young Daniel in uniform looked valiant and full of life, while the girl beside him smiled like a blooming flower. It was Linda. I had stumbled upon this photo by accident in the pocket of his old uniform. On the back, written in Daniel's strong hand, were the words, "To my beloved Linda." His love had always belonged to her. As I looked at the photo, a wave of clarity washed over me. Better to let go than to have all 3 of us suffer an endless entanglement. It would be better for me to walk away with dignity. That night, Daniel Miller came home very late, carrying a faint smell of alcohol and a trace of perfume that wasn't mine. It was Linda's scent, distinct, special, nothing like the snow cream fragrance I always used. He sat on the edge of the bed, his tall frame looking a little worn. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. His voice was tinged with hesitation. I didn't look at him. I only pulled the blanket a little higher and said softly, Linda's back. He froze. He had finally said her name aloud. I already knew. I turned over, showing him my back. Everyone in the compound knows. The air fell into a long silence, broken only by our breathing. I could feel the weight of his gaze on my back, carrying curiosity and a complexity I couldn't read. Back then, it was because of me that he seemed to want to explain. There's no need. I cut him off. Daniel, let's get a divorce. I felt the sudden jolt of his body behind me. What did you say? His voice was filled with disbelief. I slowly turned around to meet his dark eyes. They held shock and confusion, but not even a trace of pleading. The last flicker of hope in my heart went out. I said, let's get a divorce. I repeated clearly, word by word. I'll step aside for the two of you. I thought he would immediately agree, or at least breathe a sigh of relief. But he didn't. He just stared at me, his brows furrowed as if trying to see through me. Just because Linda's back? He asked. Not entirely. I shook my head and unconsciously placed a hand over my stomach. I'm tired. I've had enough of living like this. You're pregnant? His voice rose sharply, catching my gesture. He looked at my belly in shock. That reaction at least didn't surprise me. I didn't answer, only looked at him quietly. Would this news become a new chain between us? Or the last straw that broke the camel's back? Daniel's shock was like a boulder thrown into a still lake, sending ripples everywhere. The eyes that were always steady as a mountain now carried a storm. When? His voice trembled as he reached out, then hesitated midair, not touching my stomach. Over a month, I replied calmly, taking in all his hesitation. He didn't even know how to face this unexpected child. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He pressed, his tone edged with blame. I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. Tell you what? Tell you that while your first love came back, the wife you never loved was carrying your child? Sorry for being an inconvenience. My voice wasn't loud, but each word struck deep. Daniel's face went pale instantly. He opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a word. Guilt, shock, panic, all kinds of emotions crossed his usually steadfast face, making him look almost undone. He finally managed, his voice rough. Sarah, I never thought of you or the baby as an inconvenience. Really? I arched an eyebrow, imitating the way he usually interrogated soldiers. Then what's the expression on your face telling me? That you're thrilled. I pointed at my belly and continued. This is your child, Daniel, but he shouldn't be a chain binding the three of us. Linda's waited for you all these years. You owe her. Now that she's back, you should give her an answer. My words were like a surgeon's knife, cutting open the heart he'd wrapped for so long in duty and guilt. He fell silent for a long time before finally speaking hoarsely. And you? What about you and the baby? I gave a small laugh, reached under my pillow, and pulled out the divorce papers I had already prepared, handing them to him. I would go back to my city. My parents had long been waiting for me to return. As for the child, he would carry my surname Johnson and have nothing to do with the Miller family anymore. Daniel could rest assured, I, Sarah Johnson, wasn't anyone important, but I had more than enough ability to raise a child on my own. My decisiveness was clearly beyond Daniel Miller's expectations. He stared at the divorce papers, the black and white words throwing his thoughts into a tangled mess. Have you really thought this through? He asked. Never in my life have I been this clear. I met his eyes directly and spoke each word distinctly. Daniel Miller, sign it. It will be best for all of us. That night, we slept in separate rooms. I stayed in the bedroom. He slept outside on the camp bed. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a stifled coughing fit. It was Daniel. I got up and poured him a glass of water, handing it to him. He leaned against the wall, his forehead beaded with sweat, his face deathly pale in the moonlight. It was his old battlefield injury. Whenever it rained or his emotions ran too high, it would flare up again. He accepted the cup, and his fingers brushed against mine. The burning heat of his skin made my heart tremble for just a second. Thank you, he rasped after drinking. You're welcome. I pulled my hand back, my tone distant. After all, until we have that divorce certificate, I'm still your legal wife. Taking care of you is my duty. My words pierced him like a thorn. He looked up sharply at me, his eyes carrying a flicker of hurt. Sarah, do we really have to go this far? I didn't answer. I only turned and went back into the bedroom. Some questions already had their answers written in stone. Why bother asking again? The next morning, as I was packing my things, Linda showed up at my door. She looked as ethereal as ever, carrying a delicate mesh bag with several bright red apples inside. In the 1970s, those were rare treasures. Comrade Johnson. Hello. She greeted me with a graceful, practiced smile. My name is Linda. I'm Daniel's comrade in arms. She deliberately emphasized the words comrade in arms as if declaring her claim. Leaning lazily against the doorframe, I gave her a cool glance. Miss Linda, what do you want? My indifference made her smile falter for a second, but she quickly recovered. I heard you weren't feeling well, so I came to visit. These are snake apples I had someone bring from abroad. They're very sweet. No merit, no reward. I said evenly. Take them back, Miss Linda. After all, Commander Miller needs your care more than I do. I had purposely mentioned Daniel's name to see how she would react. Sure enough, Linda's eyes flickered for a moment before she put on a pitiful expression. Comrade Johnson, maybe you've misunderstood. Daniel and I, what we had was in the past. Now you're his wife. I won't interfere with you too. What a two-edged thing to say. Claiming innocence while twisting the knife. I sneered inside, though I kept my face calm. A misunderstanding? I don't think so. After all, Commander Miller coughed half the night last night because of the past. I deliberately emphasized the word. Linda's face finally changed. She clearly hadn't expected that I, the supposedly meek stand-in, would be this blunt, refusing to give her even a shred of face. You. Her lips trembled with anger, but she couldn't let it show. Just then, Daniel returned from outside, seeing the two of us standing off at the door, his brows knit tightly. What's going on here? The moment Linda saw him, she found her anchor. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she spoke in a wounded tone. Daniel, I only wanted to visit Comrade Johnson, but she seems to have misunderstood me. Her words were vague, yet enough to spark suspicion. Daniel Miller's gaze immediately shifted to me, carrying a hint of reproach. Sarah, Linda is a guest. That seemingly impartial remark landed on me like a slap in the face. I smiled, though tears stung at the corners of my eyes. A guest. That's a good one. I nodded, then turned back inside and pulled out the divorce papers. Right in front of Linda, I slapped them against Daniel's chest. Commander Miller, since your guest has arrived, then I, the unwanted wife, should leave. I want you to sign this divorce paper today. Otherwise, I'll hand it over to the political commissar of the military district, and let everyone see how their mighty Commander Miller carried on with his first love while his wife was pregnant. Without giving either of them another glance, I grabbed my already packed suitcase and walked out of the house that had suffocated me for a year. The sunlight in the courtyard stunned my eyes, but I knew that from the moment I stepped outside that door, everything would change. Behind me came Daniel's low, furious growl laced with shock. Sarah Johnson, stop right there. But how could I stop? Not only would I leave, I would leave with dignity. Leave beautifully. I didn't stop. His angry shouts and Linda's faint sobs became nothing more than the backdrop to my departure. I straightened my back, dragged my heavy wooden trunk step by step, resolute with every stride. The officers' wives poked their heads out, pointing and whispering at me. Once those stares would have blinded me. Now I no longer cared. Their gossip had no power over my life. I went straight to the logistics office of the military district and found Officer Wong, who was in charge of vehicles. Officer Wong, I'd like to request a car to take me to the train station, I said, handing him a cigarette. It was one my father had sent me through a connection, usually meant for favors. Officer Wong, a man in his 40s who usually got along well with Daniel, looked at the cigarette, then at me and hesitated. Sister-in-law, does Commander Miller know about this? You know, military vehicles can't just. Soon I won't be anyone's sister-in-law. I cut him off, my tone calm. I'm divorcing him. This is the last time I'll use my identity as his wife to ask the unit for help. It won't happen again. My bluntness stunned him. He had probably never met an officer's wife who could say the word divorce so lightly. He hesitated for a long moment, then finally took the cigarette inside. Sister-in-law, why put yourself through this? Commander Miller, he's a good man. I know, I said quietly, finishing his words for him. It's me who doesn't deserve him. Please just take care of the car, Officer Wong. Perhaps my resolve was too firm because he didn't try to persuade me further. Soon he arranged for me to ride in a supply truck heading to the county. Sitting in the rattling truck, I watched as the familiar compound grew smaller and smaller behind me. I felt no reluctance, only a rush of liberation. Goodbye, Daniel Miller. Goodbye, my short, suffocating marriage. At the train station, I bought the earliest ticket home, a hard seat. In the waiting hall, surrounded by the noise and bustle of travelers from all directions, I touched the money in my pocket. 327 yuan, and 5 jiao. It was the savings of 2 years of frugality, along with the wages Daniel had handed over every month. Enough for me and my child to start a new life. My hometown was in the provincial capital. Both of my parents worked in a state-owned factory. When I got back, I could live with them for a while and then find a job. I'd finished high school and I was quick-witted. I wouldn't starve. And besides, the little one inside me was my future, my hope. Thinking about the life ahead, I even began to feel a trace of excitement. Sarah. A familiar voice thundered in my ears like a sudden storm. I whipped my head around and saw Daniel Miller in his crisp military uniform, striding through the crowded hall toward me. Beneath his cap, Daniel Miller's handsome face was filled with anxiety and fury, the vein at his temple pulsing hard. How had he found me here? Instinctively, I tightened my grip on the ticket in my hand, my heartbeat racing out of control. In just a few strides, he was in front of me, his tall frame completely overshadowing me. He grabbed my wrist in a grip so strong it felt like he might crush the bones. Come back with me. His command was laced with barely contained rage. Let go. I struggled. But his hold was like iron shackles, impossible to break. Sarah, stop this. His voice carried a hint of pleading. Whatever it is, let's talk at home. All right. Oh. I laughed coldly, staring straight into his furious eyes. Which home, Daniel? The one with you and Linda? Sorry, I find it filthy. My words cut into him, and though the fire in his eyes grew, his grip on me inexplicably loosened. Commander Miller, please mind your behavior. We're about to be divorced. If you keep dragging me around like this, it won't look good. I shook off his hand and stepped back, putting space between us. By now, the commotion had drawn the attention of those around us. Curious eyes turned our way. Daniel seemed to realize it, too. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Sarah, he said, his voice rough. I know you're angry. I didn't handle things with Linda well. Just give me a little time. I cut him off. I gave you a year, Daniel Miller. Wasn't that enough? Ask yourself, did you love me even for a day, an hour, a single minute? My questions were knives driving straight into his heart. He fell silent, those deep eyes roiling with emotions I couldn't decipher. Pain, struggle, and even a trace of confusion. But he couldn't answer because the truth was already clear to both of us. See, you can't answer. I gave a calm smile, waved the ticket in front of him. So don't feed me that nonsense about time. Let me go. It's better for you, for her, and for me. Just then the train whistle blew. It was time to board. I didn't look at him again, and turned toward the gate. Sarah. He grabbed me once more from behind. This time his voice carried unmistakable panic. You can't leave. He clutched my suitcase, stubborn as an ox. You're carrying my child. Child. I turned back, meeting his bloodshot eyes. Slowly, firmly, I said. From the moment you chose Linda, this child has had nothing to do with you. With that, I tore free from his grip and melted into the stream of passengers. I could feel his burning gaze chasing me until my figure disappeared into the train car. The train began to move. Leaning against the window, I watched as his tall, uniformed silhouette on the platform grew smaller and blurrier. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. I only touched my belly gently and whispered inside, "Baby, don't be afraid. From now on, Mommy will build a life for us." What I didn't know was that as the train pulled away, Daniel Miller ran after it like a madman, shouting my name, his anguished voice swallowed by the roar of the engine. The train headed north, and with each mile, my heart grew calmer, like the passing scenery outside. When I returned home to the provincial capital, my parents were both startled and overjoyed. "Sarah, why did you come back alone? Where's Daniel?" My mother held my hand, fussing with concern. My father, meanwhile, wore a stern face as if saying, "I knew this would happen." From the start, he hadn't been in favor of my marriage, warning me that life with a soldier meant long separations and inevitable suffering. I sat down my suitcase and took a deep breath. Calmly, I announced to my parents, "I'm divorcing Daniel Miller." The living room instantly fell silent. "What?" My mother dropped the hot water flask she was holding with a loud crash, scalding water splashing across the floor. "Nonsense." My father slammed the table, his face flushed with anger. "Why divorce for no reason? Did that boy Daniel mistreat you?" I explained everything. The full story of Linda's return, and my pregnancy. Of course, I spared them the most hurtful details, only saying that our personalities didn't match and we couldn't live together anymore. When I finished, my mother clutched me, tears streaming down her face. "My poor daughter. Why didn't you tell us sooner?" My father stayed silent for a long time before letting out a heavy sigh. He patted my shoulder firmly. "As long as you're back, that's all that matters. Leave the rest to me. I want to see if the Miller family thinks they can just trample over my daughter like this." I knew my father was simply heartbroken for me. Over the next few days, my family was extra careful with me, avoiding any mention of Daniel Miller. My mother cooked all sorts of dishes for me, trying to lift my spirits. My father went around calling in favors, trying to find me a light, easy job. I handed over all the money I had brought from the unit, keeping only a small part for myself. I didn't want to just sit at home living off savings. It was the late 1970s, and the winds of reform were already stirring. I knew a massive new commercial era was coming. I refused to waste my life like in my past one, drifting aimlessly in a state-owned factory only to end up laid off with nothing. Yes, I had been reborn. In my previous life, when Linda came back, I had chosen to endure. I thought that if I were virtuous enough, generous enough, one day I could warm Daniel's heart. But I was wrong. I endured for a lifetime, fought silently for decades, and in the end, all I got was his final "I'm sorry." But that apology was never meant for me. The wife who had worked herself ragged for him all those years. It was for Linda, the white moonlight he had carried in his heart, who had left for faraway places. Now that I was living again, I wouldn't repeat that mistake. This time, I would live for myself. One day, while strolling the streets looking for business opportunities, I unexpectedly spotted a familiar figure. It was Linda. She was no longer wearing that eye-catching dress, but a plain work outfit instead. Gone was the pitiful, delicate act she put on in the compound. In its place was sharpness and efficiency. She was speaking to a man who looked like a black market dealer. The two of them exchanged money and goods with practiced speed. My heart stirred, and I quietly followed. I saw Linda skillfully weave through a few alleys and finally enter a secluded courtyard. Inside were piles of fabrics and polyester shirts. So this was her so-called from abroad. In truth, she was dealing in speculative trade. In the 1970s, this was a serious crime, enough to get you arrested and branded with the tail of capitalism. I sneered inwardly. "Linda. Oh, Linda, you act so pure and innocent, but behind everyone's back, you dare to run such schemes. If Daniel knew that the woman he sees as pure and untouchable is actually a black market dealer, what would he think?" I didn't expose her right away. Instead, I memorized the address carefully. This leverage might prove useful one day. When I returned home, I said to my father, "Dad, you've been trying to find me a job, right? I've decided. I don't want to work in a state factory. I want to start a small business of my own." Business. My father frowned. "You're a girl. What kind of business would you run? It's not respectable to be out there dealing with strangers." "Dad, times are changing," I persuaded him patiently. "The country's policies are loosening. In the future, private business will definitely be the trend. We have to seize the chance. To convince him, I repackaged my memories from my previous life as things I had supposedly read in newspapers or heard from others, analyzing for him the coming changes in the economy. My father looked doubtful, but when he saw how determined I was, he finally relented. What do you want to do? I want to set up a stall to sell clothes, I said, laying out my plan in full detail. I decided to start with the most fashionable items of the moment, bell-bottom pants and floral shirts. I knew it wouldn't be long before this wave of bold styles swept across the country. Whoever seized this chance would earn the first pot of gold. My father was moved by the future I painted for him, and finally agreed to take out some of the family savings to support me. With startup money in hand, I wasted no time. I found someone to source the latest fabrics from the South, then hired a few skilled tailors. Using the patterns I sketched, they worked overnight to produce a batch of bell-bottoms and floral shirts. Everything was ready. All I needed was the final push. But the day before my stall was set to open, someone I never expected showed up at my door. It was Daniel Miller. He looked worn and travel-stained, thinner by a good deal. A rough stubble shadowed his chin, and his uniform was wrinkled, stripped of its usual sharpness. When his eyes landed on me, they lit up instantly, like a parched traveler in the desert spotting an oasis. Sarah. His voice was hoarse, trembling slightly. My mother's face darkened at once. She grabbed a broom to drive him out. What are you doing here? You're not welcome in this house. Get out. I stopped her, keeping my gaze steady on him. Why are you here? He ignored my mother's anger, his eyes fixed only on me. From his pocket, he pulled out a document and handed it to me. I don't agree to the divorce, he said firmly, each word weighed down with unprecedented determination. I had the commissar reject your application. His words landed like a bomb in our living room. On what grounds? My father exploded, his beard bristling with rage. My daughter doesn't want to live with you anymore. Do you think you can force her? Daniel Miller. Daniel Miller, don't think being a commander makes you untouchable. This isn't over, Dad. Don't get worked up. I soothed him, then turned to Daniel with eyes gone cold. Commander Miller, what's the meaning of this? Haven't you heard the saying, a forced melon is never sweet? I know, he said, his gaze never leaving my face. But you're carrying my child. I can't let him be born without a father. Father? I laughed like I just heard the cruelest joke. Now you remember you're his father. When Linda came back, did it ever cross your mind that I was carrying your child? His face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came out. Sarah, I was wrong before. His posture lowered and his voice carried a rare note of pleading. Just give me another chance. I'll take care of things with Linda. From now on, we'll live a good life together. A good life? I stared at him, suddenly finding it ridiculous. In my past life, he had said the exact same thing. And what happened? Linda was a thorn lodged between us, tormenting us for a lifetime. No need, Daniel Miller. I shook my head, my voice resolute. I've already made up my mind. This marriage is over. If you refuse, I'll file a lawsuit. I don't believe there isn't a place in this world that will stand up for justice. With that, I turned away, shut myself in my room, and slammed the door. Outside, I heard my mother scolding him, his muffled voice trying to explain. I leaned against the door, my heart cold as ice. Daniel Miller, did you really think one rejected application could keep me tied to you? You've underestimated me, Sarah Johnson. The very next day, my clothing stall opened at the busiest street corner in the city. I gave it a bold name, Sarah's New Trends. I hung up the bright, stylish bell-bottom pants and floral shirts, instantly catching the eyes of passers-by. At the end of the 1970s, most people's tastes were still conservative, but young people's hunger for new things was already bubbling to the surface. Hey, comrade, why are the legs of these pants so wide? A bold young girl curiously touched the fabric of the bell-bottoms. They're called bell-bottoms, I explained with a smile. It's the most popular style in Hong Kong right now. With your figure, you'd look amazing in them. Want to try a pair? Encouraged by me, the girl blushed and stepped into the makeshift fitting room I had set up with a cloth partition. A few minutes later, when she walked out again, everyone gasped in admiration. The dark green bell-bottoms perfectly showed off her long legs, making her look stylish and modern. "Oh my God, this looks so good." The girl stared at herself in the mirror, her eyes sparkling. "I'll take them." Without hesitation, she pulled out money and bought the pants. With the first brave customer breaking the ice, business came easily. Soon my stall was surrounded, especially by young people eager for fashion. By noon, I had sold more than half of the 30-plus items I'd brought. Counting the handful of scattered bills in my hand, I was bursting with joy. This was far better than earning a fixed wage at a state-owned factory. Just as I was swamped with customers, an uninvited guest appeared at my stall. It was Daniel Miller. He had shed his military uniform and was wearing a short-sleeved white shirt and blue work pants, blending in like an ordinary worker. He didn't step forward or interrupt, only stood quietly at the edge of the crowd watching me. But I could feel his gaze resting on me the whole time. I pretended not to notice and kept cheerfully serving customers. It wasn't until I closed the stall that he came forward, silently helping me pack up, hoisting the heavy racks and fabric onto his shoulder. "I'll walk you home," he said in a low voice. "There's no need. I can manage myself," I replied coolly. "It's dark. You're pregnant. It's not safe," he insisted stubbornly, leaving me no chance to refuse as he carried the load ahead of me. I looked at his broad back, my heart a tangle of emotions. We walked in silence. Nearing home, he finally stopped and turned to face me. "Sarah, I know you're still angry." He pulled a wax paper packet from his pocket and handed it to me. "These are your favorite osmanthus cakes. I waited in line for a long time to buy them. Please have some." Under the dim streetlight, his eyes carried a trace of cautious hope, almost like he was trying to win me over. My chest tightened. Once, just one packet of osmanthus cakes from him was enough to make me happy all day. But now everything was different. "Daniel Miller," I said firmly, not taking it. "You don't have to do this. It's over between us." "No, it's not," he burst out suddenly, gripping my shoulders. "Sarah, as long as I don't agree to a divorce, you're still my wife. Let go of me." I struggled against his hold. Just then, a few thuggish voices rang out from the end of the alley. Well, young couple having a fight, huh? Pretty girl, how about having some fun with us?" The men swaggered toward us, their leering eyes crawling over me. In an instant, Daniel shoved me behind him, his gaze turning razor-sharp like a lion provoked. "Get lost," he growled, his voice carrying the undeniable force of a soldier's command. But the men only sneered, unfazed. "Tough guy, huh? Do you know whose turf this is?" Before the words were even finished, Daniel was already moving. I barely caught a blur of motion before screams split the air. In seconds, the arrogant gangsters were all on the ground, groaning in pain. Daniel hadn't even mussed his shirt. Dusting off his hands, he turned back, the fierceness in his eyes softening instantly into worry. "Sarah, are you all right? Did I scare you?" he asked. I shook my head, though inside me waves were crashing. I had known he could fight, but I hadn't expected this. Was this the strength of a soldier honed by years on the battlefield? He checked me nervously, and only after making sure I wasn't hurt did he breathe a sigh of relief. "Don't walk alone at night anymore," he said firmly. I looked at him, and a thought suddenly crossed my mind. "Daniel Miller, is everything you do for me really just out of responsibility and the child? If it's only duty, then why would you fight for me like that?" The doubt planted itself in my heart like a seed, quietly beginning to sprout. After that night, Daniel became like my shadow. Every day when I set up my stall, he stayed not far away, watching silently. I ignored him, and he didn't come closer to disturb me. But when I packed up, he would wordlessly shoulder the heaviest things and walk me home. At first, my mother would still chase him off with a broom. But after seeing him take the scolding without fighting back or talking back, she eventually stopped. Still, every time she saw him, she couldn't help rolling her eyes. Meanwhile, my business grew better and better. Sarah's new trends had already become known among the young people of the provincial capital. With my earnings, the very first thing I did was pay off all the family's debts. After that, I bought my parents plenty of nice things. Seeing the smiles on their faces gave me a sense of satisfaction I had never felt before. One day, while I was busy at the stall, an unexpected customer arrived. It was Linda. She still wore that gentle, graceful look, but in her eyes, there was a flicker of jealousy and resentment she couldn't hide. She looked at my simple but bustling stall, then glanced at Daniel standing nearby like a loyal watchdog, and the corner of her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Sarah, I never thought you had this kind of ability." She stepped closer, her voice low but full of provocation. "You gave up being a commander's wife just to stand out here in the streets? Aren't you afraid you'll embarrass Daniel?" Commander's wife. I kept showing a customer a shirt, not even lifting my head. "Sorry, I gave up that title long ago. If you want it, you can have it anytime." Linda's face went pale, then red. She was so choked she couldn't get a word out. The customers around us looked on curiously. I put down what I was doing, looked straight at her, and smiled. "Miss Linda, this is a place for business. If you want to buy clothes, you're welcome. If you're here to stir up trouble, then I'm sorry. Turn right at the door. I won't see you out." "Don't get smug, Sarah," Linda hissed, lowering her voice as she leaned close so only the two of us could hear. "Do you really think you've won? Let me tell you, the only person in Daniel's heart will always be me. The way he treats you now is only because of that child in your belly. Once the baby's born, just wait and see if he even bothers with you anymore." "Is that so?" I arched an eyebrow, unbothered. "Then let's wait and see." Frustrated at my indifference, Linda stamped her foot and stormed off. She stopped in front of Daniel as if she wanted to complain to him, but he only gave her a cold look without saying a single word. Left humiliated, she had no choice but to leave. Watching her retreating back in defeat, I felt a surge of satisfaction. That evening after closing, Daniel, as usual, carried my things. Out of nowhere, he asked, "Linda came to see you today?" "Yes," I answered lightly. "She didn't do anything to you, did she?" His tone carried concern. "What could she possibly do to me?" I countered, then added sharply, "Tell me, Commander Miller, are you worried about me or worried about your white moonlight? Afraid she might be wronged at my hands?" My words were barbed. Daniel stopped in his tracks, then turned around to face me. He stared at me, his eyes deep and conflicted under the moonlight. "Sarah." His voice was hoarse. "I know no matter what I say right now, you won't believe me. But between me and her, it's really over." "Over?" I let out a cold laugh. "Then why does she still call you Daniel with such affection? Why does she still act like she's the only one in your heart?" "I'll cut ties with her completely," he promised, his gaze more serious than I had ever seen. "Sarah, believe me." I said nothing. I only turned my head and kept walking. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to piece back together. A few days later, trouble came to my clothing stall. A group of men in work uniforms suddenly stormed up and, without a word, began confiscating my things. "What are you doing?" I rushed forward to block them. "We received a report that you're engaged in speculation and illegal business," their leader, a middle-aged man, said sternly. "I am not," I argued back. "I'm responding to the state's call to invigorate the economy. Enough talking. Come with us." They wouldn't listen to a word of explanation. Roughly, they began hauling my clothes and racks onto their truck. I was so anxious, I nearly cried. Those goods were everything I had, all of my hard work and savings. Just then, Daniel Miller burst out from the crowd. "Stop." His roar shook the air as he blocked the bureau's truck. "Who are you to interfere with law enforcement?" The middle-aged leader sneered arrogantly. Daniel ignored him. Instead, he pulled out his officer's ID and held it up. "Daniel Miller, People's Liberation Army." The moment that red booklet came into view, the man's expression collapsed. All his swagger evaporated. "Oh, Commander Miller. This must be a misunderstanding. We were just following procedure." "Following procedure?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Funny because I heard someone paid you to come here and cause trouble." Cold sweat broke out instantly on the man's forehead. "No, absolutely not. Nothing like that." He shook his head frantically. "Good. For your sake, I hope not." Daniel's voice was icy. "My wife's business is legal. If she loses even a single piece of clothing, I'll hold you personally accountable. Now put everything back." His tone left no room for argument. The officials scrambled to unload every item they had taken, setting it all back in place. Once the crisis had passed, Daniel came to my side. His eyes softened when he saw my reddened eyes. Reaching out, he brushed away my tears with his rough fingertip. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "I'm here." At that moment, as I met his steady gaze and heard the strong rhythm of his heartbeat, I felt the ice wall in my heart crack just a little. The bureau men slunk away in shame. But my stall drew even more onlookers. People whispered in amazement about how the seemingly ordinary owner of a clothing stall had such a formidable commander as her husband standing behind her. But I couldn't feel happy. I looked at Daniel with mixed emotions, grateful for the way he had stepped in, but also resentful that I still had to rely on him to resolve such troubles. "Thank you," I said quietly, my tone carrying a trace of distance. "We're husband and wife. There's no need to thank me." His eyes held an emotion I couldn't read. "Sarah, come back with me," he urged. "It's too dangerous out here. I don't want you to ever face something like today again. Go back." I gave a bitter smile. "Back to being your caged canary. Back to watching you and Linda put on your show of deep affection. Daniel Miller, let me tell you, never." I paused, then added coldly, "Today's incident was Linda's doing, wasn't it? Who else would stoop so low to target me?" Daniel's face darkened. He didn't deny it. His silence was as good as an admission. I spread my hands. "As long as she's around, we'll never have peace. The best ending between us is divorce. I won't have anything more to do with her." Daniel Miller looked at me and spoke slowly, word by word. "Sarah, I'll only ask you one thing. Do you really not have any feelings left for me at all?" His question hit me like a stone dropped into my heart. I froze. Did I truly have no feelings left for him? If not, then why had my heart skipped a beat when he stepped in front of me to shield me? If not, then why had my nose stung when he gently wiped away my tears? I didn't dare think too deeply. The pain of my previous life was like shackles wrapped tight around me. I was afraid. Afraid that if I gave myself again, I would only end up scarred all over. No. I turned my face away, unable to meet his eyes. The word came out of my mouth cold and hard. I saw his body visibly sway. The eyes that had always held a spark went dull like stars snuffed out. "Okay, I understand." His voice was heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. He quietly helped me pack up my things, then turned and walked away, step by step. In the glow of the setting sun, his back looked especially lonely and desolate. Watching him leave, my heart clenched painfully, as if something inside was being torn apart, leaving me breathless. "Sarah. Oh, Sarah, are you really going to be this stubborn?" In the days that followed, Daniel didn't show up again. My world became suddenly quiet. No more silent watchfulness. No more clumsy attempts to please me. I should have felt relieved, but for some reason, my heart felt empty. My mother noticed something was off. She asked tentatively, "Sarah, do you still have feelings for Daniel?" I shook my head, my voice stiff. He paused, then looked straight into my eyes, speaking each word with clarity. "Sarah, Linda was my responsibility and my guilt from the battlefield. But you are the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." His confession rushed through me like a warm tide, flooding every corner of my soul. Words I had waited for an entire lifetime in my previous life. This time, I had finally heard them. Rising on my toes, I kissed him, pouring every ounce of my desperate courage into it. Daniel stiffened for a moment, then pulled me into a deep, searing kiss in return. It wasn't driven by desire, but by the joy of losing and finding each other again, real and unshakable. Outside, the moonlight poured down like water, soft and gentle, wrapping around us both. I knew that from this moment on, all the misunderstandings and walls between us had dissolved into nothing. The happiness that belonged to me and Daniel Miller was only just beginning. Even after reconciling with Daniel, I didn't give up my clothing business. Sarah's new trends were my hard work, my independence, and my pride. Daniel gave me his full support. "My wife is so capable. I couldn't be prouder," he said proudly as he peeled an apple for me. He even used his connections to help me secure an official business license, turning my little stall into a legitimate private enterprise. As for Linda, the evidence of her profiting was undeniable. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Her family's connections crumbled under Daniel's firm stance and the weight of the evidence. That woman who had entangled me for a lifetime in my past life finally received the punishment she deserved in this one. With Linda gone, nothing stood in the way of me and Daniel anymore. Our feelings for each other grew quickly. He was no longer the silent, brooding husband weighed down by burdens. He became attentive, tender, even a little clingy. Every day he appeared at my stall on time, bringing me hot meals. He clumsily tried to massage my swollen legs after long hours of standing. Like an eager child, he shared stories from the unit while listening with equal interest to my business chatter. The other military wives in the compound couldn't believe their eyes. Seeing us inseparable, loving, and devoted, they were left stunned. "Sarah, you really have a gift. You even melted Commander Miller's block of ice," neighbor Mrs. said, clutching my hand in envy. I only smiled. I knew better than anyone. It wasn't tricks that melted the ice, but sincerity. A few months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. On the day of delivery, Daniel paced outside the ward like an ant on a hot pan. When the nurse finally came out and told him both mother and child were safe, this tall, strong man's eyes turned red with emotion. He named our son Daniel Jr., but gave him the affectionate name, Neon Wan. Holding the baby, I whispered the name, Neon Wan. "Does that mean longing for me?" Daniel pressed my hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes brimming with tenderness. "It means I'll miss you for a lifetime. Love you for a lifetime." Looking into his eyes, then down at the rosy, chubby little boy in my arms, I felt as though I held the whole world. This was the happiness I had always wanted. Simple, real, within reach. After the baby's first month, I left the stall to my mother to manage while I focused on my family and planning new ventures. With the foresight my rebirth had given me, I caught the first waves of China's early 1980s economic reforms. I persuaded Daniel to use his demobilization stipend to buy several houses in the special economic zone. Everyone thought we were insane, throwing money into a tiny fishing village. But just a few years later, when property prices multiplied dozens of times, everyone admired my vision. I also encouraged my father to leave his state-owned factory job and take over a failing little food plant. I provided him with several recipes for snacks I knew would explode in popularity, like spicy dried fish, instant noodles, and spicy strips. At first, he was doubtful, but when the first batch of spicy fish snacks hit the market, they instantly swept across the country. Orders poured in like snowflakes. Our family became one of the first to grow wealthy in the 1980s. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to rise steadily in the military. His ability and merits carried him ever higher. We became the couple everyone envied. Successful in career, fulfilled in family. I often thought, if in my past life I hadn't chosen to endure, but had lived bravely for myself, could I have had this life then? But life has no what-ifs. Fortunately, this time I was given another chance. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, 20 years had passed. Our son Daniel Jr. had grown into a tall and handsome young man. He hadn't followed his father's wish to become a soldier. But with his sharp business mind, he turned the small snack factory into a nationally renowned food corporation. My parents had long since retired, living quietly, tending flowers and birds in their peaceful old age. Daniel and I had stepped into middle age. His temples bore a few more wrinkles, his hair touched by frost, but the way he looked at me was still full of love and adoration, just like in the beginning. We had moved out of the military compound and into the seaside villa we bought years ago in the special zone. That day was our wedding anniversary. Daniel Miller looked at me mysteriously. "I've prepared a surprise for you," he said, taking my hand and leading me to the beach. At sunset on the sand, he had arranged rose petals in a giant heart. In the center of the heart sat an exquisite velvet box. "What's this?" I asked with a smile. "Open it and see." His eyes were full of anticipation. I opened the box. Inside lay a ring, not a huge diamond ring, but a slightly rough ring made from an eggshell. I froze. I recognized this ring. It was exactly the same as the one Daniel had given to Linda in my previous life. I lifted my eyes to him, a whirl of emotions rising in my chest. Daniel knelt down on one knee, looking up at me with absolute sincerity. "I know this ring was once a knot in your heart. In my last life, I gave it to someone I never should have, and I hurt you. In this life, I want to place it in the hands of its true owner." He took the eggshell ring and solemnly slipped it onto my ring finger. "Comrade Sarah Johnson," he said as he lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a reverent kiss to it. "I, Daniel Miller, have only one true love in this life. Will you marry me again?" The glow of the setting sun stretched his shadow long across the sand. The sea breeze lifted my hair and blew away the last trace of gloom from my heart. The knot from my previous life finally unraveled completely at that moment. Looking at him, tears streamed down my face as I smiled. "I will. Of course I will. 1,000 times over. I will." He rose to his feet and pulled me tightly into his arms. In the distance, the waves rolled against the shore, their steady rhythm like the most beautiful symphony for us. I leaned against his solid chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, feeling a peace and happiness I had never known before. Reborn into this life, I had not only changed my fate but had also found the truest love. How wonderful! Truly wonderful.